What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages? Joker back again, once again, and another week, another TWAB. Now our TWAB starts off this week talking about PvE stuff, Solstice of Heroes and the new Vault of Glass challenge mode, but since PvE is for nerds, we're gonna go ahead and skip that and dive right into the changes everybody actually cares about. And by everybody, I mean me. I'm talking about me. Shifting Sands, mid-season sandbox update. Over the last few seasons, we've seen some pretty big changes to the Destiny 2 sandbox. Aggressive hand cannons jumped into the spotlight for PvP. Rocket launchers became awesome options for PvE content. Dead Man's Tale started whistling in the wind, and much, much more. Over the last few months, the team has been working to prepare a mid-season sandbox pass, much larger than the ones we've shipped in the past. To give you all of the details, weapon feature lead Chris Proctor has, once again, agreed to lend some time to the TWAB. Hi all, Chris here. I'd like to first set some expectations. Normally, we wouldn't make large changes in a mid-season patch, but with a handful of weapons sucking all the air out of the room, we're deciding to bring some changes originally planned for Season 15 into next week's update. We'll follow this up with a big set of changes in Season 15. Moving these changes to Season of the Splicer also gives us the option of doing some reactive tuning in Season 15's mid-season patch. All in all, we'll continue to make changes outside of seasonal updates when we can, but they won't typically be this large or numerous. So credit where credit is due time. Love the changes, hate the changes, feel indifferent about any of the changes we've gotten over the last season, you've at least got to admit that Bungie's done a pretty good job of pushing changes out. Which is great because Bungie's content model seems to be throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. So the faster that Bungie can do that, the faster we'll get through the iteration process. Sort of like monkeys, typewriters, and the eventuality of Shakespeare. But the article continues, so without further ado, the big ticket items for PvP are no surprise. Shotguns, 120 rate of fire aggressive hand cannons, and Dead Man's Tale. Combined, these dominate all forms of PvP, particularly trials. We've also been getting large amounts of feedback about special weapon usage in the Crucible, and this will be a first step towards addressing these player concerns. Okay, we can't forget about Sleeper Simulant in PvE too. Okay, is anyone actually even remotely surprised that these are the weapons getting hit? When something's good in PvP, it's only a matter of time before Bungie decides to nerf it, or the community wants it nerfed, or, and this is the one that I hate, Bungie decides to artificially shift the meta to something else because fuck you, that's why. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, I'm just making a statement of fact. It is what it is. I'm just glad this time it's not an artificial meta shift, and it seems to be changes that the community really wanted. Intended special weapon roles in PvP. Most special weapons should have one situation where they're a dominant choice. If caught outside this, you should be at a disadvantage. Yes? Duh? You know, it's such an obvious thing when you say it like that. Moving towards these roles is a work in progress. Some weapons are not where we want them to be, and we've made some changes in Season of the Splicer that we expect need more adjustments later on. Well, you know what, at least they're being transparent about it. Note that special ammo abundance in PvP distorts these roles, allowing play that wouldn't be possible otherwise, and is something we're looking to address. Here are the roles that we intend for each special weapon to fill. Sniper rifles. Engage at long range with aiming skill when not already under fire. Shotguns. Engage at point-blank range using skill at movement or positioning to get close enough to get a 1 or 2 hit elimination. Fusion rifles. Engage at mid-range, but with careful positioning and pre-charging around corners required for success. Trace rifles. Strong at close to mid-ranges at the cost of not being a 1-hit elimination, making it possible to be outplayed by skillful primary users. Grenade launchers. Useful for weakening an opponent, getting damage around corners with bounces, or getting a 1-hit elimination with a direct impact. Well, at least the Sandbox team is saying the right things. For example, I've advocated for years that shotguns should be a 2-tap kill outside of barrel stuffing range. Or that snipers should have their aim assist and bullet magnetism reduced because, you know, maybe, just maybe, the skill-based precision weapon shouldn't have auto-aim. But hey, details. I'm really not trying to be condescending when I say that a lot of this just seems obvious. And yet, here we are, what, 6 years into this franchise? Well, as the saying goes, better late than never. Let's talk about weapons. Shotguns are very dominant in PvP by any measure, and don't allow much counterplay with primary weapons, particularly close-range primaries like sidearms and SMGs. We see frequent player feedback about their prevalence in PvP activities and how they make it difficult to use various weapon archetypes that otherwise feel good against players without shotguns. We want them to excel at a narrower niche than they currently do. So, this change aims to rein in the reliable one-hit elimination, but at closer ranges, and push them to be slightly rangier than current at getting two-hit eliminations. As with our intent for all special weapons, if a player is caught out of position with a shotgun, they should be at a clear disadvantage. With the ability to quickly follow up rising in importance, we expect faster-firing shotguns to eat into aggressive shotguns' dominance, and other special weapons to be more viable. Increase aggressive frame shotgun's cone angle from 4.0 to 4.25 degrees. Reduce shotgun damage fall off min by 2 meters. Increase shotgun damage fall off max by 2 meters. Note, slug shotguns are unaffected by this change. So I have to ask, is this really gonna affect shotgun usage? In fact, it just sounds like they made Fellwinter's Lie better. Not like it really matters because Destiny maps are designed in a way that shotguns are still going to be dominant. Best case scenario, if everything works out as intended and Fellwinter's Lie doesn't get buffed from this, all Bungie's really done is shift the type of shotgun that's used in PvP. So instead of aggressive frame shotguns being dominant, they've shifted the meta to where lightweight frames will be dominant. I personally would have made damage fall off more severe and probably even reduce the amount of damage that these shotguns do, to make sure that shotguns fit that role of point-blank dominance. I've also got to wonder at the wisdom of not touching slug shotguns. I wouldn't necessarily nerf damage or range or anything like that, but I would have taken a look at the aim assist and bullet magnetism stats on the weapon archetype. I just have a feeling a lot of people are about to figure out the best kept secret in Destiny PvP, that slug shotguns are actually really good and easy to use. More so now once you consider, at least on paper, shotguns are supposed to be a 2-tap kill at range, so why not use a slug shotgun? Because it's still going to be a 2-tap kill if you miss the headshot, but if you get the headshot, you're now getting OHKs between 12 and 16 meters. So I would not be surprised in the least if we saw slug shotguns replace aggressive frame shotguns as the king of the meta. But moving forward, aggressive 120 RPM hand cannons were adjusted in Season of the Splicer, but this didn't make enough of a difference. We believe that they're still too rangy and benefit way too much from a small damage buff. 2-tapping. It's tricky because now they're not much different than their pre-Beyond Light form. They already had better range and a 2-tapping rampage, but people have latched onto their ease of 2-tapping potential since the buff in Beyond Light and new 120s in Season of the Chosen encouraged people to try them out. With this change, we expect other primaries to become viable where previously 120s ate their lunch, including adaptive hand cannons, pulse rifles, scout rifles, and auto rifles, while allowing 120s to keep the advantage of hard-hitting peak shooting at range. Reduce precision damage multiplier from 1.8 to 1.6, preventing a 10% damage bonus from allowing 2-tapping in PvP. Reduced aim assist minimum fall-off distance by 1 to 2 meters depending on range stat. Reduced damage minimum fall-off distance by 1 meter. This reduces their damage fall-off advantage over other hand cannons to 1 meter. As usual, this is 1 meter before zoom scalar. Alright, let me just take off my Igneous Hammer and put back on Ace of Spades. But also, why would I use Igneous Hammer over Ace of Spades now? Or Thorn, or Hawkmoon, or Last Word? And yes, I know all of those are exotics, but currently you can make the argument as to why you would use a 120 over any of the exotic hand cannons. After the nerf, not so much. In fact, I'd even argue at this point, they might as well just roll 120s into the 140 family. But moving forward, we also have some changes to a few perks. Drop mag can no longer roll on new drops of weapons. There's a change coming next season that requires adjusting this, and some perks with similar functionality. More on that later. Pulse monitor fixed an issue where the handling bonus was no longer applying. Rewind rounds fixed an issue where the perk would not trigger if the last shot in the magazine missed, or if the player reloaded another weapon before firing the final shot. Reservoir burst. We've seen the complaint that the detonation on kills does not feel that reliable or impactful. So this has been updated with the same consistency and speed fix as Dragonfly. Nothing much to say here other than the fact that, are they removing drop mag from the game? Kinda seems like it. We will probably see a further reduction in reload perks because DPS or something. 2 exotics getting some tuning. Dead Man's Tale is dominant on mouse and keyboard, receives frequent critical feedback from players in Crucible, and is strong, but not worryingly so on controller. We're keeping the fast firing in hit, which we believe is key to the feel of the weapon. But this change will no longer have ADS levels of damage fall off while hip firing, and so will be subject to fall off much closer. It will also require better aim to land hits while hip firing. We're deliberately only touching ease of use in this change with the goal of not making it harder to use on controller. Removed hipfire damage fall-off scalar was 1.8 times to match zoom. Aim assistance cone angle scalar reduced from 1.5 to 1.2. As a primarily console player, the DMT has always been a weird weapon for me because it's not that great on console. But conceptually, it just seems like it'd be an overpowered weapon on PC. Let's take the Halo DMR, treat it like the Halo DMR, remove all shooting penalties at all times, and let it cross-map. That just seems like a recipe for disaster. Sleeper Simulant didn't receive any custom tuning when we updated linear fusion rifles. But because it has much higher body damage than other linear fusion rifles, it didn't benefit as much as intended from the global buff to precision damage scalar. Sleeper will now be the clear winner for single-shot linear fusion rifle damage, edge out other linear fusion rifles for burst damage, and largely match others for total damage for reserves. Also note that Sleeper's penalty for hitting the body rather than the head is much lower, giving it an edge in real-world damage. Fixed an issue where Sleeper Simulant was benefiting less than other linear fusion rifles from the Season of the Splicer linear fusion rifle precision buff. Total buff is now 16.5% compared to the 15% buff other linear fusion rifles received. That sounds like a lot of damage on paper, but is it enough to drag the Sleeper Simulant kicking and screaming from the halls of irrelevancy? Probably not. That's sort of the folly of a DPS game. Sleeper is an exotic, fighting other exotics for the exotic slot. And on top of that, it's a heavy exotic. So it either has to be doing big dick damage all the time, or it's not worth the slot. I've got more to say on this when we talk about the nerf to anarchy, but there's more TWAB, and it'll be more relevant in that section of the TWAB than it is here. The TWAB then goes on to list a handful of things that Bungie are going to be looking at changing in Season 15. The near future, we have more changes than usual for a season coming in Season 15. Some as follow-ups to the above, and others that were too large for mid-season. Here's a preview of some of the changes. Of course, also expect a new batch of weapons and perks. Fusion rifles. We've been wanting to tackle subfamily differentiation for a while, so we're planning on a large rework of fusion rifles. Changes to fusion rifle perks / mods, and custom tuning to most exotic fusion rifles. Is Vexmith a class of fusion rifle? Let's say yes. Grenade launchers. With the above shotgun changes, we expect other special weapons to increase in usage, and believe that grenade launchers have the potential to become more frustrating to play against as they become even slightly more common. So, we're planning a small change that specifically touches priming and cleaning up targets. Scout rifles and hand cannons in PvE. Players have wanted these weapons to be a bit more effective in PvE for some time. We found that minor enemies in high-end content take too many shots to kill with these weapons. Machine guns in PvE. Through playtesting and player feedback, we found that they're not doing their intended job well enough. So we're planning a noticeable change for Season 15. Nothing really to add to that. Glad they're looking at these weapons and weapon archetypes, but we won't know what they're changing until we know what they're changing, so we'll talk about it then. Special ammo economy, particularly in PvP. While the above changes to shotguns should help tone down aggressive frames a bit, we've got a couple of small changes planned that should reduce the amount of special ammo floating around to a degree, and have further changes in mind in case they're needed. I would not be surprised if we see the disabling of scavenger mods in PvP, or an increased charge to take them as your mods. I don't think they'll do the increased charge because then that'll affect PvE and everybody will bitch and be like, oh, here goes PvP players taking away our fun again. I could also see them nerfing the amount of special ammo that drops in PvP on kill. Anarchy has done too much, too well, for too many years, without even counting the boost it's gotten this season, which is due to the sweet grenade launcher artifact mods. So, we're making changes that make it great at a couple of roles rather than being the jack of all grenade launchers. Wouldn't that mean it's okay at everything, but not excellent at anything? Jack of all trades, master of none? Kind of a weird use of that turn of phrase. But really, one must wonder, how are PvE players going to blame this on PvP players? Controversial opinion time. I keep hearing people say that Destiny is a power fantasy game, that we should be OP in PvE. I have to disagree. Because look at the lengths that Bungie has to go to in order to make any challenging content at all. Grandmaster Nightfalls are the best example of how this power fantasy thing isn't working. The power delta in Grandmaster Nightfalls is what, 50 points difference? With tons of debilitating modifiers. We're at the point where the player character is so powerful that unless the devs severely cripple the player's ability to play the game and turn it into a slow, painful crawl, it's not all that challenging. There's also something to be said about the loss of choice. There will always be a meta. There will always be a best-in-slot weapon. Look no further than our discussion just moments ago about 120 hand cannons or Sleeper Simulant. To further elucidate using 120 hand cannons, if it's not OP, if they're only slightly better than most legendary 140s, why on earth would I ever use them? When I have exotics that outstrip and spank them when it comes to functionality. If both weapons are going to be 3 taps no matter what, and the range is relatively the same across the board, then why would I ever use a 120 when I have weapons like Ace that can do 120 damage at a 140 rate of fire, competing in similar ranges? On top of that, it allows me to have my radar at all times, it has better handling, it has Firefly. Or there's Thorn, which is a 3-tap and in certain situations can 2-tap. Stops regeneration of enemy health, allows me to know where they're going because I can see the damage tick, and it reloads itself provided I get my Orby Boy. Why would I pick something that doesn't have a litany of bonus effects if I have no other advantage using it? The same thing goes for heavy weapons. Why would I not choose the consistent damage dealing grenade launcher for virtually every encounter? So I get wanting to nerf something that has become arguably the only way to play. Controversial opinion time over, moving forward. Exotic primaries. We want to give players more reason to use exotic primary weapons in high-end PvE content, and have changes coming to help with this. And the more distant future, we will keep a close eye on special weapons and will make adjustments once we see how they perform in the wild, particularly fusion rifles and grenade launchers. We have an idea of what may need more adjustments as these changes shake out, but we'll wait to discuss them as our plans solidify. We also keep a close eye on feedback on exotic weapons and which weapons are under/overperforming. We have some tweaks planned next week, in Season 15 and beyond, which should shake things up. Note that we specifically look at Catalyst as a way to buff underused exotics. This is why we made Catalyst for Trinity Ghoul and Deathbringer, so expect similar reasoning moving forward. At the risk of being vague, we also have long-term plans to address the issue of exotic orb generation and kill trackers without making a Catalyst for every exotic in the game. Malfeasance Catalyst win? I have a mighty need. Yeah, that's one of the huge issues with exotics right now, because there are quite a few exotic primaries that aren't really worth even considering because they lack the ability to generate orbs, so you're actually being a detriment to your team's ability to generate supers in endgame PvE and PvP content. So it's good to see that they're looking into it. The TWAB goes on to talk about bug fixes and other patch notes, but nothing really all that important. All in all, like I said at the top of the video, even if I don't necessarily agree with all the changes, I appreciate the speed at which Bungie is making them, because even if we get a bad one, it looks like they're moving past the days of waiting 6 months to do weapon tuning, so there is that. Anyways, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous, but above all else, stay frosty.